Tonight, we examine the files of 3 extraordinary cases of monsters whose terrifying acts remain shrouded in mystery to this very day. From a nightmarish serial killer whose name is synonymous with fear, to a frightening beast said to stalk the Himalayas, and an agent of chaos menacing the city of Chicago. One question threads the needle between these 3 remarkable stories. Who or what is behind the monstrous mask? We begin in London's East End. The year is 1888. Life is hard for most in these seedy slums, and for women especially. Many, like Mary Kelly here, are forced into a life of prostitution. Police try to maintain order. Men like Sergeant Harry Garrett spend a good part of their patrol moving prostitutes off the street.
On your way.
Now, he doesn't know it, but Sergeant Garrett might have just saved Mary Kelly's life. That's because tonight, her profession is not only the world's oldest, but also the most dangerous. Lurking in the shadows is a customer of a different kind, one who takes payment in blood. Although Mary is safe for now, sadly, another lady of the night will not be so lucky. Polly Nichols is, in this moment, making the acquaintance of a madman. For 150 years, his horrifying legacy has only grown because the killer was never caught. But thanks to a surprising intervention from across generations, we may now, at last, be able to put a face to the elusive Jack the Ripper. Polly Nichols is a 43-year-old mother of 5 who, like many women in Whitechapel, relies on her body and her wits to make ends meet. But no amount of street smarts can help Polly, because tonight, on August 31st, 1888, she becomes Jack the Ripper's very first victim. The news quickly makes the morning papers, and police attribute the murder to a peculiarly revolting and barbarous character. 8 days later, on September 8th, 47-year-old Annie Chapman is seen spending her hard-earned street-walking money at an East End pub. Witnesses last see her leaving at 5:30 in the morning. Only a half hour later, Annie is found dead. Her injuries are ghastly, as several internal organs have been removed. This leads the coroner to state that these crimes are being committed by someone with knife skills of a surgical nature. Is this a mad doctor on the loose, a surgeon, or a butcher? Rumors swirl that London has a psychotic murderer on its hands. And it's confirmed on September 27th when the slasher sends a letter to the Central News Agency. The killer taunts the police with a haunting threat.
My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance.
And signs off with the name
Jack the Ripper.
Overnight, the world becomes obsessed with the Ripper. London is whipped into a frenzy of fear. Women refuse to leave their homes. People are terrified. The police devote a huge amount of manpower to catch Jack the Ripper. Making Whitechapel's police station the hub of the investigation, local cops, or British bobbies, haul in suspect after suspect to narrow down the search for the killer. Among those investigating the case is our young Whitechapel Sergeant, Harry Garrett, part of the desperate boots-on-the-ground effort to find the madman. Sergeant Garrett and his fellow police officers flood the streets in London's East End. And their methods aren't exactly friendly.
I swear, I don't know nothing.
But they fail to pinpoint any true suspect, and the terror continues to loom over London, with citizens wondering what act of savagery might come next. And the Ripper does not disappoint. Just 3 days later, he strikes again. On September 30th, the Ripper attacks Elizabeth Stride, a 45-year-old destitute mother of 9, slashing her throat and leaving her for dead. Minutes later, he strikes again, attacking 43-year-old Catherine Eddowes, a poor Whitechapel factory worker. After mutilating her, he slices out her kidney, leaving behind his most gruesome execution yet. As the Ripper flees the scene, the police officer spots him and calls the attention of Sergeant Harry Garrett, who gives chase. But the killer escapes. However, not all hope is lost, as the police notice an odd thing. The killer has a stiff arm and stiff knees, which don't bend as he walks or runs. They might have lost him, but they now have a description of Jack the Ripper. Witnesses described the killer as being between 5'5" and 5'8" tall, stout and broad-shouldered, aged between 30 and 40. He has a full face, dark hair, a mustache, and possibly a beard. He's wearing a dark jacket and a bowler hat. The police feel like they're closing in on the Ripper. The details about his stiff arm and legs has policemen like Garrett on the lookout for this unusual disability. Meanwhile, the Ripper sends his most unusual correspondence yet. On October 16, 1888, George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee receives a crudely wrapped box. A letter from the killer, known as the From Hell letter, explains the macabre contents.
From hell, dear sir, I send you half a kidney I took from one woman.
With the teasing salutation,
Catch me if you can, Mr. Lusk.
the Ripper has been rampaging for 2 months, what the papers have coined the Autumn of Terror. But despite the city being in the grip of fear, it's business as usual for the street-walking women of Whitechapel. Except tonight, the killer does something different. He makes a house call. You remember Mary Kelly, whose life was spared by Sergeant Garrett. Unfortunately, on this night, she won't be so fortunate. When her body is discovered, authorities find another horrific act of mutilation. But this time, there is one touch of Ripper brutality that canonizes the killer as the most diabolical of all time. He has taken a trophy, Mary's very own heart. The public outcry over the horrifying nature of Mary's murder is deafening. Detectives investigate multiple suspects who may possess the surgical skills needed to commit such ghastly murders. They scrutinize Francis Tumblety, an American doctor arrested on an unrelated charge of indecency, but he flees back to America when police begin to look at him. Also on the police's radar is Aaron Kosminski, a barber who is apparently well known among Whitechapel residents to be insane. Then there's Montague John Druitt, the son of a surgeon who is found dead soon after Mary Kelly's murder. Some theorize that his suicide could be madness brought on by being the Ripper. The police believe that any of these men could have the skills to pull off the Ripper's gruesome mutilations, but there's not enough evidence to pin the crimes on any of them. Still, the police wait for a chance to catch Jack the Ripper in action. Surely he would strike again. But he never does. The Ripper's murder spree ends with the ghastly slaughter of Mary Kelly, leaving the police clueless. Who was this demented butcher? And where did he go? Years, then decades pass, and almost a century and a half later, there is still no definitive answer. But now, a shocking revelation may finally unveil the true identity of Jack the Ripper. And remarkably, it comes from the direct descendant of one of the investigators in the case from 150 years ago. "150 years ago, Sergeant Harry Garrett failed in his efforts to stop the serial killer Jack the Ripper. Now, someone has reopened the case, and it's a family affair. Harry's great-great-granddaughter, author Sarah Bax Horton, has picked up where Sergeant Garrett left off.
I was totally inspired by my police ancestor. I think that my emotional connection has driven my research and my approach to the case.
Incredibly, Sarah is able to access files and track down leads, which at the time weren't available to her great-great-grandfather. These records were previously held under the 100-year closure rule, which is standard for institutional records.
I discovered 2 files that had recently been opened to the public from Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum.
Located just a few miles north of Whitechapel, Colney Hatch was the asylum that catered to locking up the mentally ill from the East End.
I discovered a man, a 35-year-old East Ender, who was 5'7" tall, stout, broad-shouldered, a stiff left arm, having broken his left elbow. He also had a peculiar gait or way of walking with bent knees and asymmetric foot dragging. And he had a violent antipathy to his wife, whom he attacked on several occasions. And he was known to assault people with bladed weapons. That man was Chaim Hyams. Chaim Hyams was detained by the police in December 1888. The last Ripper murder took place in November of that year, and the police must have been struggling to stop the killings. However, they did stop after the murder of Mary Jane Kelly. Hyams was discovered behaving oddly on Lemon Street, the same street where Ripper headquarters was based. He was detained by a constable for being a wandering lunatic and was taken to the local police court, where he was discovered to be suffering from severe alcohol withdrawal syndrome, and he was put into Stepney Workhouse Infirmary to recover. In January 1889, he was released for 3 months. This is a period of time which may coincide with what City of London police officer Harry Cox called a 3-month surveillance period, when Jack the Ripper was followed by city detectives on the streets of London. I also discovered from the files that Chaim Hyams was a cigar maker who used a knife for his trade, and it may be those skills which transferred onto the women he accosted. In my opinion, Chaim Hyams managed to evade suspicion owing to the fact that he was just a man on the streets, and he presented a very quiet, inoffensive demeanour. But when the fits of violence were upon him, he became extremely violent and dangerous towards women.
Even though he was never a suspect during the active case, when one looks at Chaim Hyams, a dark picture quickly emerges. Found suffering from bouts of delirium in Whitechapel, Hyams attempts to stab his wife and is eventually institutionalized in December of 1888. Around the same time, the murders ceased. So it seems more than a coincidence that the Ripper murders stop at the same time Hyams is locked up at the Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum for the rest of his life.
At the end of my exploration of the Jack the Ripper case, I then realised not only that it might be possible to solve the case, but that in fact I had solved it. And it's been the joy of my life. It's been the joy of my life to reinvestigate the case in honour of my police ancestor and in tribute to the men and women who collaborated in an attempt to bring Jack the Ripper to justice.
And so, incredibly, a family of detectives joined forces over the span of 150 years to shine new light on one of the world's most infamous cases. We'll never know the psychology that might have driven Hyams to commit these heinous crimes, but we do know that the Ripper was an arrogant killer, taunting the police, boasting that he would never be caught. Except that maybe he has. If Sarah Bax Horton is right, Jack the Ripper has finally been pulled from the shadows, and Sarah's great-great-grandfather, Harry, can rest easy, knowing the streets of East London are safe at last.